We are here to talk about the Season 2, Episode 4, and the end of Part 1 of... As we open with the day Omni-Man almost killed his own son Mark and left thousands dead in Chicago as he took off into space in search for answers of who he's become. We see that Nolan has been traveling across space long enough for him to grow a full beard. As he stares into the soul of space, he continues to drift further into the galaxy until he comes across a destroyed planet, and at the exact same time, a group of aliens and a broken ship from Thraxa are about to fly directly into his destruction. Until Nolan stops this ship and he saves them. As he guides them back to their home planet and he's about to head off back to his journey of self-discovery, they yell out thanking him and they welcome him to stay and to let them know who he is and where he comes from, as this seemed to be the perfect opportunity for Nolan to start over. This is a perfect example of why I love this show so much, because as we'll talk about later in the breakdown, as this show is starting to build this redemption arc for Nolan, it was great to see him leaving Earth and that he wasn't just normally okay, he wasn't just fine with what just happened, he was heartbroken, he was destroyed about what he just did to his son, what he did to those people in Chicago, what he said about Debbie. So I love that they showed that Nolan was definitely heartbroken, and like I mentioned, the redemption arc starts now. As we immediately cut back to last week's cliffhanger, as we see Mark slowly walks up to him, and there's some caution going on there. There's a little bit of anger built up in Mark, as it should be, as Nolan prepares to potentially get into another fight with his son, but Mark goes in for the hug. Now, Nolan tells Mark that he missed him, but the Thraxans need his help right now. But this father and son reunion doesn't last long because Mark calls him out for being a liar, number one, to get him here, just like he lied about who he was and what his purpose was back on Earth. Now, Mark reminds Nolan what he did to those people back on Earth and calling his mom a pet, as Nolan in his own kind of way tries to apologize, but Mark doesn't care and he tells him that he can go screw himself and he takes off, but Nolan follows him. Nolan tells Mark that he must come with him and he has to show him something very important, and these people do indeed need his help, as Mark agrees to stay behind just for 5 minutes as he's about to learn the truth. Now, we learn that Nolan didn't conquer this planet, but he was given the title as their new emperor, but that's not all, as Mark sees his dad kissing another woman and he officially meets his new stepmom, but also his new baby brother. Now, this is a lot for Mark to take in right now, and personally, I don't blame his reaction at all, because this is a lot to process, and as we'll learn, this planet learns how to process things a lot faster than humans do on Earth, so we're going to focus a lot on this father and son reunion and everything going on Thraxa at the end of this breakdown, but I want to switch gears and focus on the supporting cast. We get this perfect mirror parallel sequence with what we saw with Nolan going on at the end of last season, as we tie this into what's going on with Debbie, who's walking in the streets barefooted and she's just completely lost, just like Nolan was at the end of season 1, which ultimately leads her to his grave and wondering why her. 20 years down the drain and the relationship built on a lie, and Debbie feels like she never knew who Nolan truly was. We later see Debbie getting a visit from Art in this episode, who tells her that he's always believed that she was the strong one in the relationship, she was the real superhero, that she kept things afloat for this family by taking care of Omni-Man and Nolan, but also taking care of their son Mark. And more importantly, Art brings up she was the reason that Earth wasn't taken over by Nolan 20 years ago, because he saw the beauty of humanity, and that was something that was so key. I love that scene between Debbie and Art, because she is her own person, and I think that these encouraging words just reminded her that she's more than just Omni-Man's wife. As we later on see Debbie gathering up all his books, which were important for a little bit later in this breakdown, and she tells Cecil that she no longer wants his money, she no longer wants Nolan's money from these books, because she wants this money to, number one, go to the survivors of Chicago, but also she doesn't want to be owed anything for Cecil. Debbie won't be changing her mind about this as she leaves those books on the curb for the trash to pick up. This is the stuff that I really love about what's going on with Debbie. This isn't just something she can just forget about and just move on with. I love that the show is taking the time and showing her grieving, but also showing us as an audience that she does have that courage, she does have that power to moving on from Nolan. But as we'll talk about later, maybe she'll have some feelings about Nolan when she learns out what happened on this planet Thraxa. Meanwhile, we see the Mauler twin who survived that explosion back in episode 1 has created his clone, and no more debating because for the first time they know who the clone is. As the original, or as he calls himself, King Mauler, he has the clone at the beginning gathering up all the materials they need to make more of himself after getting the idea from seeing all the different versions of themselves from the multiverse. Now, speaking of clones, throughout this episode, we see Donald trying to figure out why Debbie was so shocked to see him from a couple episodes ago, as he went over to her house when she wasn't there, and he ended up finding his glasses in that rubble from the explosion, which, by the way, I don't know how the hell he found those glasses there, but anyway, he finds the glasses from the house from last year that it was exploded when he was trying to sacrifice himself to slow down Omni-Man. As we see him eventually hacking into the GDA surveillance footage where he sees exactly what happened to him. As the theme of discovering oneself continues with Eve, she runs into Amber and William at school, who she's looking for Mark, but finds out that he's on a mission in space. But they notice that something's off about Eve, and they want to help her out and want to hang out with her. She promises them that she'll catch up with them in the following day, as we know that she's still very bothered by what happened at the park that she built, but also what her father told her about her powers being dangerous. Now, back at the Guardians headquarters, it seems as everyone's off doing their own mission because we don't see the Guardians in this episode. As Eve is crashing there, she hears a loud noise in the background. She goes to check on it, and she finds her favorite villain of the week, no one other than Kill Cannon, who's still in some type of device that Robot Man made. Now, he's in the facility, and all this pent-up anger, all this aggression, Eve's ready for a fight. She's looking for a fight, as we see her being a little bit cocky because she is managing to take him down pretty easy, and we know she's always taking him down, even when she was a kid, and we saw that in her special episode earlier this year. But again, we see Eve is tapping into her anger side and not really focusing on making sure that the innocent civilians aren't caught in between this battle, as we see that she kind of underestimates Kill Cannon and his counterattack, which leads to a couple in a car being thrown off a bridge, and we're kind of left to believe that maybe they're going to die or maybe they're going to fight for their life, which we know Eve's going to blame herself about what just happened. And again, whether it's Nolan opening up this episode trying to find out who he is, seeing Debbie going on her own self journey, seeing Eve trying to see the hero she wants to be, to Donald literally trying to figure out who he is, I love that theme in this episode. But we now are going to get back to that father and son awkward reunion. Now, Mark feels like him and his mom have simply been replaced by bugs, but Nolan tells him that's not the case, that he was lost after what happened on Earth, and he was able to help them, and by saving their lives, he felt like he had purpose again. Now, Nolan tells Mark the real reason he needs him is because that there are Viltrumites that will be looking for Nolan after his actions and will be searching for him, and he needs Mark's help to fight against them, but also they need to protect his planet, but he also needs to protect his new baby brother, who will be targeted for being inferior to them and going against the procreation with the lesser species. Mark, yet again, is right by his response to his father, who now wants him to protect his baby brother that he just met, but he also wants him to stand up for these people that he don't know, and his father is a liar, and also, need I remind you, last time they saw each other, he was trying to kill him. But unfortunately, time is up, as those same Viltrumites who attacked and almost killed Alan have arrived. Mark is tasked with getting his new stepmom and brother to safety while Nolan holds them off. Mark takes them into the caves for hiding and has a moment with his new stepmom and learns that his brother gets to actually pick his name when the right time comes about, but also he learns that this species only exists for 1 year, but their son has a slow aging because of Nolan. Now, she tells Mark about her relationship with Nolan and that yes, his father is definitely a complicated individual, but someone she loves, and that Nolan loves Mark regardless of what happened last time they saw each other. Now, this very touching moment is cut short by Lucan, who tells Mark he must prove himself worthy or else he dies. Now, Mark must fight to protect them, but unfortunately he isn't trained enough to go against a Viltrumite, as we see his head getting pushed into the ground with a single finger. As Nolan arrives, we get to see two peak Viltrumites going toe-to-toe, Lucan versus Nolan, and for the first time in the show, two trained Viltrumites going toe-to-toe, and this scene did not disappoint, as Nolan uses his signature move and cuts Lucan's stomach open, and he appears to kill him with a finishing blow, which is grabbing a rock and stabbing it right into his guts. This scene was amazing. But they still have 2 Viltrumites to take down. Now, as Nolan and Mark head back, they see the others have unfortunately been killed by the remaining 2 Viltrumites, as Nolan briefly taps back into his old self and he chokes Mark and he questions his emotional state. Why should he care about their deaths? As Mark tells him this is how he should have felt when he was back on Earth. But again, no time to self-reflect, as we see those Viltrumites are here to finish their mission and they're here to kill Nolan. Now, after mocking Nolan about this species that they just killed, we are about to get a 2v2 for the ages. Now, we know Mark is improperly trained to take on a Viltrumite, as Nolan's technically going 2v1, and he has to help Mark throughout this fight, but there's a brief moment between the fight where we see Nolan telling Mark, "You're holding back, son," and Mark tells him, "I don't want to kill anyone," but Nolan reminds him it's either kill or be killed, and then also that his brother's life is on the line, and it is time to fight like a Viltrumite. As we see my boy Mark, Invincible, takes the advice from his father, and not only does he hold his own against this Viltrumite, but he almost defeats this Viltrumite, but doesn't land the killing blow, as we see this incredible cut sequence of all the crazy, insane, visceral punches being thrown between these Viltrumites. Now, Mark is almost killed, but Nolan splits the one Viltrumite's head and breaks the other's lower jaw. Love the scene so much, as Nolan goes back to check on his son, but unfortunately, he is kicked directly in his back, breaking his spine by Lucan, who calls in the reinforcements. As we see the Viltrumites gathering their wounded soldiers, and they take Nolan, as he tells Mark to not forget the good that he's done, all the work that he's put in, but also to read those books that we know his mother has taken out to be thrown away. As we end this epic episode with Eve back home with her parents, Debbie appearing to get back on track, and she seems to be heading back to work herself. Meanwhile, Donald cuts himself to see if he still bleeds, and he's relieved that yes, there's blood coming out of his arm, but he also notices that the knife is bent, meaning that he might be some part man, part robot. As Mark wakes up, he's introduced to General Creed, and he tells Mark that based on his survival, he's proven himself worthy, but he now must finish the job that his father wasn't able to do back on Earth. As he tells Mark that his father will indeed die, and if Mark doesn't complete this mission on conquering Earth, they will come to pay Earth a visit and will kill millions, and unlike Nolan, they don't change their minds. I'm telling y'all right now, I can't wait to see more of General Creed. I can't wait to see my man Mark, aka Invincible, get his payback. But we end this episode with the end credits showing the Mauler's twin, and the one clone, Haven, being called the clone so many times, gets upset. He kills the original, and we see that they're completing their work to get more of themselves as clones. So major questions going into part 2. What will Eve do about her future as a hero? Will she rejoin the Guardians, or will she continue her solo missions? I personally feel as though she'll probably join the Guardians and kind of build that up again, which I personally am okay with. I love the Eve character, and I love the journey we've been on so far with that character. Which, speaking of, we didn't see the Guardians in this episode, but I'm very much interested to see the relationship building between Ruby and Amanda continue to grow, but also what's going to happen between this love triangle between Immortal, Rex, and Kate. Now, will Debbie continue this path of forgetting Nolan? And more importantly, how will Debbie react when she hears the news from Mark, who will let her know about everything that went down on Threxa? Will she be excited to hear the good news that Nolan seems to be getting back on the man that she used to know? Or will she be upset, but also, there's a threat coming to Earth? How will Debbie react to that? Which is the biggest question. Will Mark take on his heritage and finish the mission on conquering Earth? Or, which I feel will end up being his choice, will Mark gather all the heroes and villains to work together to fight against the enemies? I don't think this is the last time we've seen Nolan, y'all. Like, we need to get his redemption arc. He needs to continue to build himself up for what he did to Chicago, and also what he did to calling his wife a pet and also almost killing his son. So I definitely believe we're going to see Nolan, we're going to see heroes and villains working together to protect Earth. But also, can I throw into the mix, maybe Mark's baby brother will age up by then and he'll also join the fight as well. But not like I need to remind you all, but also there are still other threats to look out for. We have the Maulers and their whole twin situation and them building more clones. We have the Squids from Mars. We have the Lizard Lead. And can't forget about the multiversal villain Angstrom, who I'm sure has found a way to defeat Mark throughout his travels in the multiverse. Overall, this episode was a great mid-season finale and did such a great job of having characters like Mark, Nolan, Debbie, Eve, and even Donald go through these somewhat self-reflection journeys within this episode and learning who they are and who they want to be and the struggles that came with that. It was just so well done, so well acted. In the action scenes, let's just talk about that right now. The show never disappoints when it comes to action, but this 2v2 or 2v1 Viltrumite versus Viltrumite, to me, was definitely some of the best fighting sequences of this show, and it might be in my top 3 fights of the series so far. I can't wait to see what happens next, which I believe we can probably expect part 2 sometime early 2024. I'm thinking maybe early February, late March. Either way, I can't wait till next year. This will end my recap and breakdown of episode 4 and my recap of the completion of part 1 of season 2 of Invincible. I want to take this time to thank you all for watching. I would really appreciate it if you can hit that like button, share your thoughts, your theories, and your comments. I haven't read the comics, so please try to stay away from spoilers, but definitely share your thoughts on this finale and what you all hope to see in part 2, as well as consider subscribing to the channel. Check out my playlist of all of my Invincible coverage, but also check out my latest review. You all are awesome. Hope you're staying safe, and I'll catch you all on the next video.